every single ghost in the Grand Theft Auto games. In Grand Theft Auto 3, the absence of explicit supernatural entities paradoxically makes the earliest ghost interpretations more persistent. The game's technical limitations and sparse narrative presentation caused certain repeatable phenomena to stand out sharply against its otherwise grounded structure. One of the most discussed ghost-adjacent occurrences involves fixed locations where environmental audio persists without any visible cause. Construction zones, industrial buildings, and unfinished interiors sometimes emit mechanical noises long after all activity has ceased. Because these sounds loop consistently and are tied to exact coordinates rather than mission states, players interpreted them as traces of unseen presences rather than background ambience. Another phenomenon frequently cited involves distant human figures that appear momentarily on foggy streets or near docks, only to vanish as the player approaches. While these were ultimately the result of pedestrian despawning, the timing and framing created the illusion of intentional avoidance, a behavior commonly attributed to ghosts in folklore. Importantly, these events never occur randomly across the map. They are anchored to specific zones, which reinforce the idea that these locations were haunted rather than merely glitch-prone. In this way, Grand Theft Auto establishes the conceptual groundwork for ghosts not as entities to be confronted, but as fleeting presences that resist verification. Vice City introduces the first widely accepted case of a deliberate ghost encounter through the infamous Chainsaw Apartment. What distinguishes this event from earlier implied hauntings is its layered consistency. Upon entering the apartment, the player is immediately confronted with a revving chainsaw sound that has no visual source. The sound is spatially anchored, growing louder as the player moves through the room, mimicking the audio behavior of a real weapon despite no character model being present. Bloodstains on the floor persist across visits, and even when the player leaves the apartment, the chainsaw noise can continue briefly, as though the source refuses to remain confined. The fact that this scene resets perfectly every time the apartment is re-entered suggests intentional design rather than an abandoned mission asset. No explanation is ever provided, and nobody references the event, which isolates it completely from the narrative framework. This isolation is crucial, as it positions the ghost not as part of a story but as a self-contained anomaly. Vice City also contains a smaller number of less prominent ghost-adjacent phenomena, such as bloodstains reappearing in certain interiors after disappearing, reinforcing the idea that violent acts leave behind something persistent even when no characters remain. In Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas, ghost-related phenomena multiply dramatically, largely because the game's scale allows for vast, underpopulated regions where isolated events feel more deliberate. The most famous of these are the ghost cars found primarily in Flint County. These vehicles roll downhill without drivers, often appearing to move with intent rather than randomness. Their paths are repeatable, and their appearance does not depend on player interaction, which led many to believe they were scripted hauntings rather than physics errors. While later technical analysis revealed that the cars are the result of parked vehicle spawning combined with terrain physics, the fact that they appear only in specific rural areas and follow the same routes ensured their reputation as haunted vehicles. Another highly persistent claim involves the Back O Beyond Forest area, where players reported seeing a tall, pale humanoid figure during foggy weather. This figure would stand motionless or move slightly before disappearing when approached. Although eventually debunked as a visual illusion caused by fog density interacting with tree models, the phenomenon occurred so reliably in one location that it became one of the most iconic ghost legends in gaming culture. Additional claims centered on abandoned airstrips, desert regions, and long roads where distant figures appeared briefly at night, reinforcing the pattern that these supposed ghosts avoid proximity and refuse confirmation. San Andreas is unique in that it blurs the line between actual design and emergent myth, producing a catalog of specific ghost sightings that persisted for years despite technical explanations. In Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the idea of ghosts becomes inseparable from the game's myths because of how frequently specific, repeatable phenomena occur in isolated locations. Unlike earlier entries, San Andreas provides enormous stretches of countryside where scripted content is sparse, allowing unusual events to stand out sharply. This environment gave rise to several distinct ghost legends, each tied to precise regions, conditions, and behaviors, which is why they persisted for so long and were widely believed to be intentional supernatural inclusions. The most famous of these phenomena are the so-called ghost cars of Flint County. These vehicles appear on rural roads and hillsides, most commonly during nighttime or foggy weather, and exhibit behavior that feels deliberate rather than chaotic. The cars roll downhill without drivers, often following the same paths across multiple play sessions. What made these vehicles feel ghostly was not merely their movement, but their apparent indifference to the player. They do not react when approached, hijacked, or obstructed. They simply continue along their path until physics causes them to stop or crash. This created the impression that the cars were reenacting past events rather than responding to present circumstances, a key trait commonly associated with hauntings. Although later technical analysis showed that these vehicles are spawned parked on sloped terrain and begin moving once physics activates, the fact that they appear only in specific rural locations ensured their reputation as haunted objects rather than simple glitches. The consistency of their behavior transformed a mechanical quirk into one of the most enduring ghost legends in gaming. Players often reported spotting lone pedestrians or humanoid shapes on hillsides, airstrips, or desert roads, only for them to vanish as the player drew closer. This behavior mirrored traditional ghost lore, where spirits can be observed but not approached. In reality, this effect was caused by level of detail transitions and NPC despawning, but the timing often felt intentional, as figures would disappear just as the player believed they were close enough to confirm what they had seen. The repetition of this experience across isolated regions reinforced the belief that San Andreas contained entities designed to avoid direct observation. The abandoned airstrip in the desert became another focal point for ghost speculation. Players claimed to see figures standing near hangars or along runways at night, often remaining still before vanishing. These sightings were tied to the airstrip's lack of active missions and minimal NPC traffic, which made any unexpected figure feel out of place. Because the airstrip is visually open and flat, distant objects are easier to misinterpret, especially under low light. Yet again, the key factor was location specificity. Reports consistently pointed to the same airstrip, the same time of day, and similar conditions, giving the illusion a sense of intentional design rather than coincidence. San Andreas also generated ghost myths around water and bridges, with players reporting shadowy figures beneath the surface of lakes or near rural crossings. In some cases, submerged pedestrian models or environmental debris were mistaken for human shapes, especially when distorted by water effects. These sightings often occurred in remote areas with little narrative context, which made them feel disconnected from the game's crime-driven logic. While none of these were actual ghosts, the fact that they were encountered repeatedly in the same locations caused them to be remembered as specific hauntings rather than visual noise. What makes Grand Theft Auto San Andreas unique is not that it contains confirmed ghosts, but that it creates conditions where specific illusions behave like ghosts. Each major legend involves a fixed location, limited visibility, restricted interaction, and repetition over time. These are the same qualities that define confirmed ghosts in later entries. As a result, San Andreas functions as a transitional point in the series, where the line between myth and intentional design becomes blurred enough that players collectively construct a supernatural layer onto the game world. Unlike later games, San Andreas never provides definitive confirmation or denial of these ghosts within the game itself. There is no explicit apparition, no backstory embedded in environmental text, and no clear visual model designed to be seen up close. Instead, the game allows uncertainty to persist. This ambiguity is precisely why the San Andreas ghost myths became so influential. They were not singular moments, but repeated experiences shared across thousands of players, giving them cultural weight even after being technically debunked. In retrospect, the ghosts of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas are best understood not as entities but as patterns. They emerge from the interaction between scale, isolation, technical limitations, and player expectation. Each specific legend, whether ghost cars, forest figures, or disappearing silhouettes, behaves consistently enough to feel intentional, yet never clearly enough to be confirmed. This unresolved tension is what makes San Andreas the most mythologized entry in the series, and ensures that its ghosts, real or imagined, remain some of the most discussed phenomena in gaming history. Grand Theft Auto 4 marks a turning point by introducing a ghost that cannot be dismissed as a byproduct of engine behavior. On a pier in the northeastern section of Liberty City, a female apparition appears only at night and only when viewed from a distance. The ghost is visually distinct, semi-transparent, and humanoid in a way no other effect in the game replicates. She emits no sound, performs no animation beyond standing still, and vanishes instantly if the player approaches her. This behavior mirrors traditional ghost folklore, where spirits can be observed but not directly confronted. Environmental clues nearby reference a woman who died violently, strongly implying a direct connection between the apparition and a specific death. The encounter is not tied to any mission, achievement, or reward, and it cannot be triggered manually. Its sole function is to exist. This makes it the first unequivocally supernatural entity in the series, designed not to be interacted with but to be noticed. The precision of its implementation leaves little room for interpretation, firmly establishing ghosts as deliberate inclusions rather than accidental curiosities. In Grand Theft Auto 5, the series reaches its most explicit and narratively developed ghost through the apparition of Jalene Cranley Evans on Mount Gordo. Unlike earlier ghosts, Jalene's appearance is governed by strict temporal rules, manifesting only between 11:00 p.m. and midnight. Her form is clearly defined, with visible injuries that directly reference the manner of her death. The apparition reacts to player proximity by disappearing, preserving the consistent rule that ghosts in the series resist direct engagement. What sets this ghost apart is the depth of contextual information surrounding her. Environmental details, in-game media, and the blood-written name, Jock, on a nearby rock collectively identify her husband, Jock Cranley, as responsible for her death. However, despite this clear accusation, the game provides no mechanism for confrontation or justice. Jock Cranley never appears physically, cannot be harmed, and cannot be interacted with in any way. As a result, Jalene's ghost remains permanently unresolved, reappearing night after night with no possibility of closure. This makes her haunting fundamentally different from myths or glitches, as it exists as a complete narrative statement rather than a puzzle to be solved. When viewed collectively, ghosts in the Grand Theft Auto series are defined by restraint rather than spectacle. Each specific ghost is bound to a precise location, operates under narrow conditions, and avoids interaction. None of them function as enemies, objectives, or gameplay systems. Even as the series evolves technologically, ghosts remain rare and carefully isolated, ensuring that their presence feels disruptive rather than normalized. By expanding from implied phenomena to fully realized apparitions, the series demonstrates a clear progression in how supernatural elements are integrated, while maintaining a consistent rule. Ghosts exist to be seen, not confronted, and their stories remain partially or entirely unresolved.